Global Economy Collaboration Code session is about to begin. I'll go ahead and invite our very, very distinguished speaker, who's also the session chair, the one who's moderating the session. We have with us Rotarian Manpreet Singh, President, International Chamber of Investment and Business. So, sir, if I could please invite you on stage first up. And you and I will have the delight of inviting your panelists on stage. We have with us Anton Panayotov, Deputy Chairman, Bulgarian Business Leaders Forum. We have with us Manalac, Senior Vice President, Financial Technology, Nasdaq. Shantanu Mukerji, Partner, Gulf Capital. We are also joined by Bingumal Thewarathanthri, CEO, Standard Chartered Bank, Sri Lanka. Amit Goenka, Chairman and Managing Director, Nisus Finance. Sri Krishnan, Chief Business Development Officer, National Stock Exchange of India, NSE. And Vivek Anandobroy, Partner, Nisus Finance, UAE. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause to welcome all our speakers on stage? I know the mobile phones are out, but let's also, can we have that applause? Because hello, I know it's that time of the day where your thoughts are also on food, but the food for thought will also continue. So let's keep that energy coming up. All the speakers on stage, thank you so much everyone for joining in. I'm going to be also quickly handing over the proceedings to Mr. Manpreet Singh. With that, over to you, sir.
Good to go? Oh, there we go. There are my belongings. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Can I hear a good afternoon? Lovely. So after that thrilling session that we had just before this, and such a real-life thrill, and what excitement we had, we're going on to economics. So, but we'll try to keep it as entertaining as possible. We have a lovely session of panelists here. We have a lovely gathering. We have lovely experience. You've seen all of them at some point of time on television, on as audiences, and as friends, philosophers, and guides. So welcome today to today's session. I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists. We have with us Anton, who's the Deputy Chairman at the Bulgarian Business Leaders Forum. Hello, welcome, Anton. We have Manalac. He's the Senior Vice President, Head of Sales, APAC, FinTech, Nasdaq. Welcome, sir. Shantanu Mukerji, Partner, Gulf Capital. Mr. Bingumal, he is the CEO, Standard Chartered Bank, Sri Lanka. Amit Goenka, Chairman and Managing Director, Nisus Finance. Sri Krishnan, Chief Business Development Officer, National Stock Exchange, and our very own Vivek Oberoi, whom I think needs no introduction. Welcome, all of you all. So we're going to keep it a little lively and interactive. We're going to take a conversation, and we're going to keep moving the conversation. And we hope that it gets entertaining and thrilling, as you would like to see. Well, we're talking today about global business, opportunities, collaborations, coming together and being together. Last year saw India host the G20 with the theme of Vasudev Kutumbakam, which meant the world is one family. The government of India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, took India to new heights with this campaign. It showcased India as a uniter, as a person, as a country, as a group that brings together the whole world. And this was something that was never seen in the past. We're talking about uniting economies today. We're talking about a global business summit, which we're here right now. So with this, I would like to throw open today's session. Anton, you're from Bulgaria. How do you see yourself integrating with India and with the finance sector? And how do you think that institutions, industries, and collaborations can happen between nations?
I mean, how can you talk about all this after what we just saw, the guy flying? It's uncomparable. Inevitably, it is one big family, no matter how much we don't realize it or don't want it. It is an incredible fact that for the last 20 plus years, let's say 30 years, globalization played its key role. We are richer because of it. And these are processes that we certainly hope we don't see dismantled. Because we are 50s, in our 60s, we're all children of globalization. And India is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger part of it. The one thing that India does right, it doesn't treat it as a sprint, treats it as a marathon. And that is a very key difference from other big nations. With this being said, opening the borders, collaborating more, working together, allowing Indian businesses to go out, foreign businesses to step in. There's always a balance in it. But if this process is somehow stopped, we honestly don't know what risks would be created and where the pockets would be that we have to start curing again. So indeed, yes, everything we've seen with technological development speaks that globalization should continue, not the other way around.
Thanks, Anton. First of all, you made me realize how old I am, but anyways, let's leave it at that. So, globalization has brought its own challenges. We have definitely uniting, we are coming closer, the world is becoming smaller and smaller, but it is also evolving as a culture, evolving as coming together. The finances are changing, the way banking is done is changing, the way economies are merging together is changing. So the world is a very different place. And every day that we wake up, it's a whole new world. And it's something that we least expect. Coming to RG, you are with Nasdaq. Nasdaq is present in so many countries. You are very well invested in India. You're based out of Singapore. You look after US. How do you think this unity works, and how do you think Nasdaq has added value to this?
Yeah, look, first of all, it's great to be here. Great to be back in India and with such an esteemed panel. So I'm honored to be here. As Anton said, I think none of us will deny that the way forward is through collaboration, right? But at the same time, we live in very interesting times. I think as you see around the world now, there's a lot of talk of isolationism, coming back to internal nationalism, that sort of thing. My personal feeling is that any developing country, any modern country, can't really fulfill its whole potential without collaborating with other countries in many ways. And so if you really want to fulfill your potential in terms of business or whatever it might be in economies, I think we have to really work as an ecosystem to do that. And one of the things that Nasdaq tries to do, obviously many of you know Nasdaq as the big, large US exchange. What many of you don't know is that from a financial technology perspective, we support and provide technology to about 130 economies around the world in terms of their markets as well. And so it's in our best interest to ensure that we're standardizing, we're modernizing those technologies in those countries from that perspective to allow as much capital to flow between those countries, to allow as much liquidity to flow between those countries, to allow those markets to develop on their own. And so, like I said, I think one of the key things to Anton's point, there is risk in that as well. And so I think we also have to keep in mind that we have to try to not put too many obstacles in our way when we're doing that, right? So when it comes to regulation, things like this, obviously that's a big topic these days. I think it needs to be more smart regulation, not over-regulation in terms of that, to really prohibit business in any industry. And that's always a risk. I think it's a challenge as well for politicians and governments around the world as well. And so we hope to obviously influence that as well through our experience working with regulators around the globe and things like that as well.
And you're right. I think when you talk about obstacles, I think obstacles and regulations get thrown at you irrespective of the industry and the country that you're in. And that's what ruffles feathers. And that changes a lot of dynamics when you're talking about investments, when you're talking about capital, when you're talking about multi-geographical economies. When you talk about, let's talk about Gulf capital. Gulf capital, what do you think are the sectors that you would like to invest in when it comes to India or India to the world, if I may say so?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think I'll start by saying that throughout, we're a buyout fund, it's a private equity fund. And over the past 15 or 16 years or 20 years when we started, or when I started my investing career, it was always about understanding the business, the fundamentals of the performance of the business, the management teams, what they're doing. But that world has changed. Today we start with an understanding of geopolitics. We start with an understanding of national interest. We start with understandings of course, the environment and regulation. So that has become the starting point of what we do. Now, it's not a bad thing. Actually, bilateral agreements between countries are forming the basis through which we all invest going forward. There are several areas of collaboration. One thing that people look at is isolationism or national interest as a negative thing. But a lot of countries are actually saying it's not being isolationist, it's about national interest. And we are seeing how India has really come far ahead in its journey in being able to assert what is important for its national interest. And that actually allows for a more stable investment regime. When we look at sectors that we invest in, the other thing that we see, in addition to bilateral agreements, trade blocs, cooperation, is the role of technology in creating those investments. And India has been a very strong exporter of technology globally. India probably missed being the leader of goods, but has taken on the leadership of technology and services. And those are the areas where we finally are, we're investing. And it's quite interesting to see how regional blocks and connections and the rise of the economy is enabling that process.
That is a lovely perspective, I must say. You never thought that you could actually look at finance and investing in that perspective. But when you talk about nationalism, I think what is good for me, what is good for my country, must be definitely good for the world. Because what happens is when you are coming into a sector, you're coming into an economy, starting business in a certain country, what's good for that country will be definitely good for your business in that country. So I think that is what we need to understand as investors, as leaders, that nationalism might not be such a bad thing that we make it out to be. And I think that's what really needs to be highlighted. And when you talk about different regions and different bilateral trade, but multilateral trade also does play a big role. We have with us Bingumalji. You are from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been an all-weather friend of India. We've been close since centuries, if I may say so. And it's not only about business and economy, it's about culture, it's about relations, it's about being with India and the kind of support both countries have had for each other. What do you like to highlight on that in terms of economy and perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Just to take you back to the recent Sri Lanka's economic crisis, just to give you a quick explanation, it was years of not having the fiscal discipline, running large, deficits, fiscal deficits financed through external sources, and low reserves, and COVID happened. The reserves came down and we had to default. Again, on the debt pile, just to give you a perspective, we were like at the time of the default, it was 50-50 foreign and local. We had like 4 billion plus from Japan, close to 6 billion from China, so on and so forth. We had another 2.5 billion of ISB portfolio. Long story short, debt's been restructured. Sri Lanka has got a upgrade to a CCC plus. But what is amazing is during the default, this is 2022 April, when we declared that Sri Lanka is going into sovereign default. The first time ever I myself experienced sovereign default. It was daunting, and India came forward as a friend. So not only on financing, supporting on commodities, pharma, food, energy, bilateral loans, swap facilities, giving us time to settle on certain other clearing arrangements that we had with India. Close to $4 billion of financing was given during the crisis until we got into a proper IMF program and came out of it. It took like more than 2 years for us to restructure the debts. But the friendships are tested during these difficult times. Just to give you a quick perspective of the bilateral trade, India-Sri Lanka bilateral trade is something like 5 billion. I think we can do much more. In terms of South Asia also, I believe that our entire export basket as South Asia is something like less than 600 billion compared to, if you look at what ASEAN is doing, it's definitely more than $5 trillion of exports from that part of the world. And South-South trade is growing at a rate, it's grown like 4 times since 1995 to a 20% of the global trade. And we in South Asia is not grabbing that full opportunity. Something for us to think about. The intra-Asia, intra-South Asia trade is also, I would say, a lot of room for improvement. We have our treaties, but all countries for that matter, I'm not pointing a finger at a particular country. I think as South Asia, we have to work together because we got 25% of the global population in South Asia. We should at least do 5% of global trade as an export, region.
So true. And I think, when you really go back in time, and not very long ago, I'm not talking about thousands of years, but few hundred years back, India's trade was about, I think, 30% of world trade. And we are at just about 3%. So and this was when technology was not present at all. The facilities, the systems were not there. The world was not so connected. And I think we could have easily gone from that to about 60 to 65%. It should definitely be reaching that level, but the industry needs to come together and take a boost of that part. I think we need to look beyond traditional markets of US and Europe that we've been doing. The world is very big. We're talking about global south. We're talking about being the largest consumers. We're talking about the largest producers, all coming together and creating a whole new world and new economies of scale, I would say. Amitji, I would like to come to you. You are with Mrs. Finance. You are with real estate projects and investments and all that. How do you think urban housing or sustainable housing or even low-cost housing, how do you see this changing the cities of the future?
Thank you very much. I think it's a privilege and a real honor to be here amongst a very distinguished panel. I have a very firm belief that sustainable urban development is the key to human growth and inter-economic cooperation. We've seen the way cities have been urbanized thanks to energy transition, digitalization, and upliftment across geographic landscapes. And of course, that brings the need for sustainable urban development and sustainable urban livable locations for populations which are becoming more and more moving to habitable locations. We've seen India potentially moving from 36% urban to 50% urban over the next decade and a half. We've seen potentially the world also moving from about 3.6 billion people to almost 3.6 trillion people to almost about 6.7 trillion people moving to urban locations. That's a very huge footprint that needs to be created, and that obviously brings with itself sustainability challenges. So keeping in mind the fact that apart from energy transition and digitalization, urbanization is the third wheel which is going to cause the shift of sustainable livability for our future generations. We've committed ourselves and our capital to building, and investing into such developments across India and the GCC. We do believe that the SDG goals of 2030, while hard to achieve, must be kept in mind. And of course, capital is today the biggest enabler and dictator of terms. So we've seen the reduction of greenhouse emissions over the last decade, ever since we realized that almost 36% of greenhouse actually comes from urban development and infrastructure development. And I think that's been reducing with the net zero goals that Europe and several other nations have taken. India is also committed to do the same, as are other nations. And of course, capital needs to be, as I said, the great enabler and intervening force to make sure that happens. We're talking of close to about $8 trillion of investment for urbanization just in India, as we look at 2047 Viksit Bharat. That's a very large goal from where we are today, and that includes not just urban cities but also sanitation, healthcare, and basic amenities which are going to sustain our cities. So I think it's a very large mandate that we've taken upon ourselves, which is a very great unifying factor as nations are collaborating to ensure that we do create a more sustainable and a more livable environment for ourselves, because it's collectively influencing the world. The whole global emissions, the whole carbon effect is not just affecting India or China or the US. It's obviously a global phenomenon. And we've seen great corridors of partnership getting built. We've seen a very strong India-UAE corridor getting built with almost $100 billion of mutual trade. A lot of it is based on healthcare, defense, digitalization, and urbanization. Likewise with Japan, likewise with Switzerland, likewise with many other parts of Europe, and so on and so forth. So obviously, Global South therefore becomes a very dominating force in this whole ecosystem, where we're looking to create the future for ourselves, which is built on the capital solutions around urbanization. I think it will become a unifying force as we have to rebuild cities post geopolitical tensions. And that has to be built in a very planned and sustainable way. We've seen reconstruction of entire countries within our lifetimes. We've seen the whole geopolitical shift when we create new cities and new urban locations, which creates a more humane and a more tolerant society. Because it is this divide of have and have-nots, which is led by lifestyle issues, which is creating a lot of these disruptions. And so I think our interventions, which is what we're really trying to see, is what are we offering to the world. Obviously, our demographic dividend, our demographic profile, which is our people. You know, we're looking at creating 600 million people who are going to join the workforce to create more sustainable societies in the future. And they need to be empowered and capitalized. And that money, therefore, we put must not just create societies, create great returns, but also create a very huge sustainable impact. And obviously, that's been a driving force and mission for us at NISIS Finance, both in India and in other emerging economies, including the UAE. We're also seeing the impact that one is able to create when one takes our experience over several decades, several centuries, and takes it to emerging economies. We're obviously aspiring to move in the India footprint or learn from peers who've actually been there, done that, talking about the India-Sri Lanka partnership, talking about some of the other global south and emerging economy partnerships. I think we're able to take our learnings, our capital markets, our technology, our people, our skills, our products to the global markets and replicate them multifold times in those regions. We're doing the same in the UAE, where we're taking our technology and our financial systems, platforms, and vision, the way we build sustainable cities with the smart city mission, with Amrut, which is obviously aimed at the Atal mission for rejuvenation and urban transformation, which is creating 50 new cities in India. From a 6-city country, we're going to a 50-city country. And I think the Mahakumbh, we're in a small kumbh of sorts here today with 1,500 participants. But obviously the Mahakumbh again is a very great epitome of what humanity can do to build societies and create a more tolerant and a more sustainable society when people from all over the world, and we're talking about 50 crore people, congregate in one location. It actually says that it's beyond monetary. It's beyond monetary. So India is offering that beacon of hope, which is based on mutuality, based on spirituality and trust, and the ability to accept the good of the other. And I think that's what a capital is really driving at.
Very true, very true. And you mentioned Viksit Bharat. I think that is, you mentioned 50 new cities, but not only that, it's 100 new ports, 100 new airports. And I think we are at a stage where I would like to say that well begun is half done. And I think that's how the government of India is putting it and putting in real efforts and on the ground with the entire machinery looking to push it through. And it's going to change India's perspective to the world. And I think it is going to be one of the largest economies that the world might be investing in very soon. The figures are talking for themselves. And of course, you mentioned UAE, top 5, one of the top 5 trading partners of India. And it's only going to go higher with the SEPA and the systems that are coming through. And I think this is a new opportunity that we need to really cash upon. Absolutely. And of course, it's been always called a sister city of Mumbai since a really long time, with one leg here and one leg there. So that's something that we really need to go upon. And so thank you on your perspective on that part. I would like to now invite Sriramji. Sriram Krishnanji is the Chief Business Development Officer for the National Stock Exchange. So you have literally bred companies, nurtured companies, put them onto the bandwagon, seen them grow, seen them multiply exponentially. How do you think this is going to evolve, and how will innovation change all these systems, especially in the system of banking, how you're handling these companies, and how India is going to change?
I'm very glad to be here, first of all, and thank you for asking this question, because I come from NSE, which is possibly India's first IT company, possibly India's first fintech, and possibly the most innovative company we've seen in a long time. At the time of independence, India was one of the poorest countries in the world. And a poor country like India to rise to a level where we are, let's say, the 5th largest economy is a massive leap. And how did it happen? We had to obviously democratize financial markets. We had to obviously make it easy for people to come to capital markets, raise money. And we had to encourage people to participate in this framework. Now, for people to participate, you need to have a solid trust quotient. Building a solid trust quotient doesn't happen through any magic wand. You need to work day in and day out for a number of years. It is a moment of great pride for us today that in calendar year 2024, NSE was the IPO capital of the world. More companies raised money here, and we raised about $19.6 billion, bigger than some of the biggest exchanges in the world, which have been our role models for a long time. I think we as a collective community have embraced the idea of self-help, and for India now to get into the $10 trillion GDP bracket, obviously the market cap of NSE listed companies needs to be somewhere like 11 trillion or 12 trillion dollars. So we are talking about a growth from, let's say, $5 trillion of market capitalization to 11 or 12 trillion dollars of market capitalization in the next 10 years possibly, which means we need to bring more and more companies to the platform. Not only that, we need to get companies that are already on the platform to do well. I think we have also to thank the regulators for the vision that they have brought to the table and the corporate governance that they have, the quality of corporate governance that they've made possible, because of which the companies look good. When the companies look good, the Nifty looks good, and automatically everything else happens. So I think we have a fantastic capital markets framework, and we have a huge amount of optimism on the table because of increasing retail participation. Think about it. We had just about 3 million investors in the early 90s, and today we have more than 110 million unique investors with more than 250 million accounts that they are trading through. This is unbelievable. And every month we are seeing another 3 to 4 million accounts getting created. The kind of participation that can be expected to happen in the coming years is mind-boggling. So I think it's an optimistic period of time that we are going through, and India is certainly in a sweet spot.
No, very true. And I think, the figures speak for themselves. And when you talk about, let me talk about myself. Since I was a child, I'm listening to this sentence that, oh, the markets are overpriced. The markets are really overpriced. But it's been so many decades. I have never really seen that happen. Other than, let's say, one or two black swan events that in 75 years, I think that you can really discount. But that also, if you really look at the long term from what the 90s stock markets were and what it is today, I mean, if you would have sustained that, you would have put your savings into that, I think the common man would have been king today. I mean, I'm sure most of them are still up. So that's so true. And we really look forward to NSE and taking companies growing on this part and making India, I'm not so sure, let me use the word, making India great again, as they say nowadays. Absolutely. Yes. That brings me to you, Vivek ji. You've been with India, UAE. You're the link of, I would say, culture, business, Bollywood, and economy. How do you think your perspective has brought about this change on innovation, sustainability? How do you think AI has changed this thing, the way you do business?
Oh, wow. I think what Bollywood gave me was this very interesting currency of fame, celebrity. And I started out with optimizing that currency for following impact. And originally it was all non-profit. I wanted to use that celebrity to help save poor children, farmers' children, laborers' children fighting cancer, and they couldn't afford it. So I used that legacy for that good. I used that legacy to rescue girls from exploitation, set up Project Devi, and empowered them with education. But what I kept stumbling upon was, how do you magnify this impact, and how do you create something that doesn't have asking fatigue and giving fatigue? And that's when I started looking at social impact for profit as an interesting idea. And the more I delved into it, the more I realized that when you started the conversation with Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, why I look at India not just from a patriotic perspective, but why I look at India as uniquely poised to be the true development engine of the global South is because of the ethos that India has always carried. You see, I truly believe that you cannot achieve true prosperity in the absence of harmony. And if you look at Bharatiya Sanskriti, it has always been, every tradition of India that is thousands of years old has always spoken about finding that sweet spot of harmony. Which is why you didn't hear about Indians going out and conquering so many nations to be 26, 27% of global GDP and hugely progressive before we got exploited. Even today, the Indian approach, whether it's with Sri Lanka or friends in Africa, under the able leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has been incredible. We have not been going in with an exploitative mindset like some of our other neighbors. We have not been going in with a mindset of colonial guilt like some of our friends further up north into the global south, that 200 years we've exploited these buggers, now let's give them a handout. We're going in with collaborative capitalism. And I think if you add, this is what I try to follow coming in from an Indian ethos, is how do you create collaborative capitalism with karmic consciousness? How can you add that into the mix and then create exponential growth along the story? I think India has a lot to offer. Currently, whether it's at NICES, the work that we're doing, we're exploring so many interesting opportunities to create public housing, not just in India, but people assume that just because of oil money and the perception of wealth in the UAE, public housing would be spectacular. It's not. There is a big gap in public housing. And with this growth, the economic boom that the UAE is seeing, there is more need for sustainable, SDG-oriented public housing, which we're working on. We're looking at so many sustainable technologies that emanate from India. And therefore, I look at my role as a bridge between two nations, where I'm sitting under this incredible umbrella, the kind of relationship building exercise that Prime Minister Modi ji has done with the UAE, it's incredible because I live there. We're actually feeling it in the grassroots. We speak to Emiratis and they're fans of him. He's presented India in a whole new context, and that's what's brought so much excitement, Manpreet. Today, there's excitement of not only bringing in capital from the UAE. I've taken about 12 companies public here, and the last one was at NSE. We're about 5 times up from our investment. But the idea is, how do you take those companies, build value here, and then look at all those companies, like I'm looking at acquiring a company in the US, which is too small to get listed on Nasdaq. So that's an interesting opportunity for us. How about companies in Brazil, companies in Africa that could do with both collaboration, technical experience, going into a whole new market with hand-holding, but at the same time create the value across, not just in Africa in physical value, but on a listed sense back home in India. So I think that economic embrace that India offers, that handshake that India offers, not a hand on the throat, but a hand on your heart, I think that is what the big differentiator of brand India is today.
Very rightly said. I think that deserves a clap, right? So, and so truly said that, India goes to the world with an open heart, and I would say Modi ji's philosophy of starting everything with a brand, lovely hug, and that's how he begins conversations, and that comes straight from the heart. It's not calculated, and it comes from the Indian ethos. I think whenever we go and meet people, by default, we just open our arms to people, and we assume that we're going to be best friends forever. Let it be for business, for tourism. India has changed the world, and how the perception of India has changed. I talk from personal experiences. At the end of the day, about 2 decades ago, when I used to go to some countries in Europe, they used to ask me, looking at the turban, "Oh, are you from Egypt?" So I used to say, "No, I'm from India." So, and that's how it's changed. And today, people come running up to me and saying, "Oh, you are from India." So that's how it has changed completely. And that's what is making all the difference to businesses, to economies, to all of us. And that's how it's moving on. And with this, I would like to have like a 1-minute conclusion from all of you. I'd like to start with you, sir. What do you think is going to be the new India?
Empowered, confident, but also better governed. I think that is really important. I think we have a long way to go if you look at GDP per capita, etc. So the new India has to also realize its weaknesses and not be carried away with all the strength, because the biggest danger you have is when you stop looking at the challenges you face. But from a technology, from a governance, from a policy, from an identity perspective, I think we're on to something where we're going to go back to where we were 300 years ago.
True. Anton, I'd come back to you. What do you think is going to be the future economies and how we are going to be all coming together?
That's a very loaded question.
You can see the timer, right?
The one thing that I would love to pick on is on Vivek's comment. It really struck with me. Collaborative capitalism. That, powered with proper capital markets, is dynamite. That is extremely powerful concept which keeps people engaged, communal, and participating in the success. You manage to do this, everything else is off limit.
Let's not forget the karmic consciousness also.
Yeah, if I could just add to
Indeed.
that comment, if you don't mind. So,
Yes, please.
again,
Please
building
feel
on
free.
Vivek's comment on collaboration, I think that it's hard to make it concrete, but I think Nasdaq's experienced part of this with our community of banks, where we support about 2,500 banks, really in the Americas alone. And they work with us to basically fight anti-financial crime and fight, which is obviously increasing globally. But what we decided to do was basically, instead of working with each one individually, we said, let's combine all your data as a consortium, and let's see what that can do to fight financial crime. So cool. And it's now become the largest anti-financial crime network in the world by these companies that traditionally compete, but at the same time realize there's an opportunity here to come together and collaborate to really benefit society, right? So that's what I think us as emerging markets and as India independently can recognize, is that there are going to be these opportunities where obviously we're surviving to compete with each other. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to benefit the overall society together. So, crucial.
Very true, very true. Sriramji, I'd like to come to you on this one after what he said. You know, we are condensing economies. We are bringing finances more integrated. There's a lot of risks also that come associated with all this when the whole world gets combined. And how do you see the risk mitigation? And how do you think the world evolves from here on?
I think the biggest risk today is geopolitics and possibly technological disruption. And I think everybody goes through this. You know, NSE, in fact, is busy thwarting about 5 million attempts every single day to bring down our system. And I'm sure this is the case in most of the other international exchanges as well.
Yeah.
So this is real. And, you know, today the new war is probably not going to be the war fought with soldiers, but it's more a war on one another's economy. And, you know, this is very, very sad, you know, if it happens. But I think we need to collaborate better and deal with these risks, you know, in a spirit of collaborative, success, I would say, with the objective of succeeding all together, not just, you know, get into a spirit of one-upmanship where, you know, one tries to get ahead of the others. So I think we have to uplift the world, and, you know, collectively we can do it. One of the other challenges that we see now everywhere in the world is immigrants, and elections are won based on what you do with immigrants. And why is this happening? This is because there is economic disparity between two regions. And so long as there is economic disparity, there is always going to be an associated movement of people. You can do whatever you want to try and arrest that, but I think it's going to be very hard to totally eliminate that. So again, you know, what if we uplift the lower region and bring it on an even keel? Is that not one of the solutions?
Correct. I think that's what will change the whole world altogether, because that's what we see the world, all over the world, these things are happening. Bingumal-ji, last few comments from your side. And I would say that maybe importance of economic diplomacy, how you have seen from your side.
No, the reality is world is sadly divided and it's getting into a multipolar world. The economic ties are changing. So especially for small countries like Sri Lanka, it's critical that we diversify our export basket and diversify our markets and work with those superpowers closely and be neutral on geopolitics. I think that's the most important thing for a country like Sri Lanka, because because of our location, we are exposed to many forces. So that's one takeaway.
Perfect. Amitji, any last words from your side?
No, I think we're seeing a more collaborative environment. We talked about G20, we talked about Global South, we talked about the way SAARC is moving, we talked about Commonwealth today as well in the morning. I think unifying, these are very strong unifying forces where there's now today a true exchange, of not just thoughts and ideas, but also of services and goods. And I think it's a very real thing. I mean, when we're seeing Make in India happen, and we're seeing what we didn't really think that technology could be transferred to India, we've only seen as a back office or as a assembly line, not as an R&D center. not as a creator of value. So I think when value is transferred and one is able to share that value across a larger geographic landscape, I think that becomes a very strong unifying force. And I do see that being accelerated with Asia at its epicenter. And therefore, we are very bullish on the way the Asian economies are going to shape the world.
Perfect, perfect. And, the closing remarks from you, Vivekji, you are now actually a multinational person, if I may say so. So, a few words on shared economies and shared values, I would say, would close this session.
I think India has a lot to offer. Like I mentioned earlier, we've transitioned from the Jugaad economics, where we're trying to make the same thing cheaper or trying to save pennies, cut costs, to the innovation economics end. And I think that's the spectacular change. At NSE, even with those great numbers of about 11 crore people or 110 million people participating there, we're still about 7% of the country's population. So the minute it starts to look more like 25% of participation, can you imagine the depth, the economic depth that the markets will have, the DIIs will have, rather than always depending on the FII inflow and exits based on geopolitics where we have no control over. So that strengthening is key. How do you strengthen that? You work with MSMEs in India, not just for providing solutions in India, but then create a bridge to take them global, which I'm doing right now. Taking companies from India, listing them, taking them from India overseas, using the UAE as this incredible launch pad, as this friendly neighbor with a lot of capital, looking to add value to their GDP that is non-oil sector. So you align with their thought process, and then you look at Africa in a non-exploitative way through that launch pad. So I think it creates the perfect triangle, and thereby you're building value for global participation in India, just like America did, and that's how they became the economic engine of the world. Today, I can buy a share sitting in India in a US-listed company, but somebody who is a US citizen cannot individually buy a share in India. So we have to open up those markets eventually too, and allow that kind of economic participation and trust in our markets.
Thank you so much. And I think at the end of the day, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much. It was a lovely panel, lovely engaging. Of course, we tried to match up to the thrills of the previous session. Thank you so much, everyone.